The drumsticks hit the floor at 10:47 p.m., and the sound they made cutting through the noise of the Velvet Room was so wrong, so final, that the bassist standing 3 feet away felt his stomach drop before his brain even caught up with what his eyes were seeing. Notice, because what happened in the next 4 minutes set off a chain of events nobody in that room had any way of predicting. And the reason nobody saw it coming is the same reason this story has never been told the way it deserves. The Velvet Room was a narrow, low-ceilinged club on the west side of Chicago. Exposed brick walls, the color of old rust, string lights that had been up since 1987, a stage barely large enough to hold 4 musicians. It held maybe 200 people on a good night, and on November 14, 1996, it was packed with a crowd that had come to see one band, a 4-piece called Meridian. Meridian was not famous, but they were the real thing, the kind of band serious music people traveled to hear because their sound felt earned. Singer Dara Mills had a voice that could shift from a whisper to a roar without losing a thread of emotion. Guitarist Curtis Webb wrote progressions moving between funk, rock, and blues without settling on any long enough to become predictable. Bassist Andre Cole had studied jazz theory for 6 years, and drummer Marcus Reed was the engine whose sense of time was so precise that Curtis once said, half-joking, that Marcus didn't follow the song. The song followed Marcus. Tonight was supposed to be the most important performance of their careers. 2 talent scouts from Crossfire Records had confirmed they were coming. Not the biggest fish in the industry, but real. For a band playing tips and door splits for 3 years, a meeting with Crossfire could be the difference between 5 more years on the circuit or recording something people outside Illinois might hear. Marcus had eaten bad clams at dinner. Notice that detail. It is the hinge on which the entire night turned, and nobody saw it coming because bad luck rarely announces itself. By 10:30, Marcus was in the venue's bathroom. Dara stood outside speaking in the low, controlled voice she used when trying not to panic out loud. The response from behind the door was not printable. Its meaning was clear. Marcus Reed was not going to be playing drums that night. The stage manager, Patrice, ran through options. House drummer, out of town. Opening act's drummer, already gone. Call someone. Nobody reachable in 30 minutes who could walk in cold and hold down a professional set. She was already composing her apology to the crowd when Dara grabbed her arm. "We are not canceling," Dara said. "You cannot perform without a drummer. Then we find one." Patrice stared at her. "In 25 minutes. In a bar." "Yes?" 4 seconds of silence. Then Patrice, who had developed, over 11 years of running shows, a certain philosophical flexibility about the impossible, picked up the handheld microphone and walked onto the stage. She tapped the mic twice. The hum of the crowd dropped to a murmur. "Hey everyone, we've got a situation. Meridian's drummer is sick, genuinely sick, and we're looking for someone to step in. If there's anyone in this room who plays drums and thinks they can hold their own with this band, now is the time." The room went quiet in that particular way rooms go quiet when everyone is waiting to see if someone else will move first. A few people exchanged glances. Nobody stepped forward. Patrice waited 15 seconds. She was about to lower the microphone when she heard, from the back of the room, a single voice. "I'll sit in." The voice was not loud. It wasn't trying to be heard above the crowd. It was simply at a volume that assumed it would be. Calm. Almost flat. The kind of voice that had spoken into microphones before and knew exactly how much effort that required. Everyone turned. Look at where the voice came from. In the far back corner, at a small round table, a man was standing up. Dark jacket, collar turned up. A black baseball cap pulled low enough that the brim cast a shadow over the top half of his face. He was alone. He had a glass of water in front of him. Not a drink, just water, in a room that smelled of old beer and amplifier heat. He had been there since before the opening act, though nobody could quite remember seeing him arrive. Dara looked at him from the side of the stage. Her first thought, he's too still. Most people who volunteered in a moment like this leaned forward, showing off the offer with their body language. This man was just standing, shoulders relaxed, waiting, as if he had answered a question in a meeting and was prepared to either sit back down or go to work. "You play drums?" Patrice said. "I do. Have you heard Meridian before?" A brief pause. "I've heard them." "Yeah." Curtis, in the wings, leaned toward Andre. "Who is that?" Andre squinted. The lighting was low and warm, the kind that made everyone look like someone you might know but couldn't quite place. "I don't know," he said. "But look at how he's standing." Curtis looked. He wasn't sure what Andre meant at first, and then, after another second, he saw it too. Something about the posture, the exact placement of the weight, the particular stillness, like a word sitting on the tip of his tongue. The man made his way to the stage without urgency, without looking at anyone directly, head slightly down, the cap doing most of the work. When he reached the stage steps, he paused and looked at Dara, and for just a moment, with the stage lights catching the angle of his jaw, something flickered across the room. A collective almost recognition, a shared sense of familiarity that nobody could immediately source. "I'm Michael," he said to Dara, quietly. "Tell me what you need." Dara shook his hand. "Our set is 12 songs. The first 3 are in the set list on the floor monitor. Tempos are marked. Can you play them for me once?" he said. "Just the first 8 bars of each. I'll be ready." 8 bars. She pushed the disbelief aside. "Okay, 8 bars each." He sat behind Marcus's kit and adjusted the throne with 3 quick turns, down, then slightly back. The adjustment of someone who knew the exact height they needed, and picked up the sticks. He held them 1 second without striking anything, turning them once in his hands. Then he looked at Curtis and nodded. "Remember this moment, because everything that comes after begins here, in those 2 seconds when a man in a black cap held a pair of drumsticks and did nothing." The crowd had gone almost entirely silent, and somewhere in that silence, if you were paying close enough attention, you could feel the room beginning to shift. Curtis played the opening 8 bars of the first song. The volunteer listened without moving, eyes fixed on Curtis's left hand, tracking chord changes the way someone reads a page, absorbing, storing. When Curtis finished, the volunteer played the same 8 bars back, not a copy, not a demonstration, but a response, as if the drum part had always existed inside the song and he had simply located it. Andre's mouth came open very slightly. They ran through all 12 songs' opening bars in 11 minutes. By the 4th, Curtis and Andre were exchanging glances they didn't have words for yet. The volunteer was not showing off. He was doing something more unsettling than showmanship, playing the exact right thing every time, with a precision that felt less like skill and more like memory. Patrice reappeared at Dara's elbow. "Who is he?" "He said his name is Michael." "Michael who?" "He didn't say." Patrice looked at the man adjusting the hi-hat with surgical efficiency. "Something is very weird," she said, not alarmed, but like someone beginning to understand that the night was not going to go as planned. At 11:02, Meridian took the stage. The stage lights hit hard, the kind of heat you feel on your forearms from the front row. From the first downbeat, something was different. Not wrong. Different. The space between the bass and the drums, that crucial pocket that either makes a rhythm section feel tight or makes it feel loose, was locked in a way that raised the entire band the way a strong foundation raises a building, not visibly from the outside, but in the solidity of everything built on top of it. Dara felt it in the second verse. Her voice found a pocket in the rhythm she had always known was there but had never quite landed in. She settled into it and stayed. Curtis felt it during his first guitar solo. He glanced back and saw the volunteer watching his face, not his hands, adjusting the dynamics in real time to support exactly what Curtis was doing emotionally, a kind of listening very few drummers were capable of. The knowledge sat in his chest like something warm and slightly alarming. The Crossfire Scouts were still watching. In the front section, a music student named Jasmine had been watching the drummer since the second song. She noticed the modified left-hand grip, a subtle wrist turn she had seen in footage before but couldn't place, the barely perceptible head nod, less about keeping time than about feeling it. The kick drum, clean, precise, serving the song rather than announcing itself. She opened YouTube on her phone, not to record, to look something up. By the fourth song, the Crossfire Scouts had moved from the bar closer to the stage. They had driven from their office for this. Sandra had a reliable instinct for when something real was happening. Something real was happening. She leaned toward her colleague. He nodded without taking his eyes off the stage. Look at what's happening in this room. Because the band on that stage doesn't know yet what the two people at the edge of the crowd are beginning to understand. Between the fourth and fifth songs, Curtis crouched near the kit on the pretext of adjusting his monitor. He got close enough to see the volunteer's face at the right angle, shadows falling differently at this distance. He looked at him for 2 full seconds, then stood, walked back, picked up his guitar. His hands were not quite steady. "You okay?" Andre mouthed. Curtis gave one small, deliberate nod. The nod that meant, "I'll tell you later. Pay attention right now." The fifth song asked more of the drummer than anything else in the set. Not speed, not power, but restraint and feel, knowing not just what to play, but what not to play, and trusting the silence to carry the same weight as the notes. The volunteer played it like he had written it. Jasmine found what she had been looking for on her phone. She stared at the screen, then at the stage, the modified grip, the head nod, the way the body settled into the throne, poised like something ready to move in any direction. She put her phone in her pocket and covered her mouth with both hands. "That drummer," she said to the stranger beside her. "Look at him. Yeah, he's great." "No." She shook her head. "Look at him." The stranger looked, and looked. And then his expression cycled through confusion, concentration, and disbelief before landing somewhere that had no clean name. The expression of someone who has understood something so improbable the mind keeps trying to walk it back. "No," the stranger said. "That's not." "I think it is," Jasmine said. They were not the only ones. Across the crowd, in ones and twos, the recognition spread. The slow, reluctant kind that comes when what you're seeing is too improbable for your brain to fully accept. Whispers moved through the room like a current under still water. People pulled out phones not to record but to compare, pulling up an image, holding it against what their eyes were showing them. Listen, because the man behind the kit has not changed a single thing about how he's playing. Stop for one moment and picture this room from above. On stage, Dara is singing the bridge of the 7th song, the best she has ever sung anything. In the crowd, 170 people are experiencing two things simultaneously: a band performing at the peak of their abilities, and a realization so enormous that some of them will spend years trying to describe what the moment felt like. And behind the kit, under the low bill of a black cap, a man who has spent his entire adult life being the most recognized person in any room he enters is, for these 45 minutes, just a drummer, playing like it is the only thing he has ever wanted to be. By the 10th song, there was no longer any real doubt in the room. The scouts hadn't moved. The question was no longer whether, but only when. The answer came at the top of the 11th song. Dara stepped to the microphone and, instead of counting the song in, stopped. She stood with her eyes closed, and when she opened them she was looking directly at the man behind the kit. He met her gaze. Something passed between them. Wordless, the communication of two people who have spent 45 minutes doing something extraordinary together and both know it. "I need to stop for 1 second, she said. Her voice was completely calm. "Tonight started with a crisis. Our drummer got sick and we almost didn't play. Then someone in this room offered to help." She paused. "I think most of you have figured out who our volunteer is. Before anything else, I want to say thank you. Because what he did tonight, sitting in with strangers, no announcement, just showing up and playing, that is the most generous thing I have ever seen another musician do." She stepped back from the microphone. Every face in the room turned to the man behind the kit. Watch his hands. He was still for a moment. Then he reached up, slowly, and removed the baseball cap. The sound that came from 170 people simultaneously cannot be described. It was not a scream, and not applause, and not silence. All three at once, the way certain chords are simultaneously multiple notes and one sound. People grabbed each other's arms. Two near the front sat down on the floor, as if their legs had made a unilateral decision that standing was no longer viable. Michael Jackson looked out at the room with a quiet, slightly bemused expression. The expression of someone who has caused this reaction before, who knows exactly what it is, and who has never quite made peace with it. "Hey, Chicago," he said simply. The reaction redoubled. He waited for it to settle, and when the room had dropped from a roar to something approaching quiet, he leaned toward the microphone and said, "I'm just the drummer tonight." Sandra from Crossfire had her hand pressed flat against her sternum. Her colleague's pen had stopped moving. Dara looked at the crowd, then back at Michael. "We have 2 songs left," she said, "and I would very much like to finish the set." The crowd answered with a sound that settled the question entirely. They played 2 more songs. Michael played the 11th with a completeness that Dara had no category for. He was inside the song, and the band rose around him the way a tide rises around something solid. Curtis played the best guitar solo of his life. There was something in it he had never quite accessed before, and he knew exactly where it had come from. The final song built slowly, nearly 2 minutes before Dara's voice opened up and the full band came in. The crowd went still. When they all arrived, locked tight, the reaction was not applause or cheering. It was something closer to relief. The particular relief of a feeling that has been building for a long time and has finally been allowed to arrive. After the last note faded, Michael set the sticks down on the snare with a soft, deliberate click. He came around the kit and stood beside Dara and said something only she could hear. She nodded once, slowly, with the expression of someone who has just received something they didn't know they needed. Remember what this night started as. Later, by the side of the stage, he talked with Curtis about chord progressions, asking questions, not offering answers. He talked with Andre about bass and kick drum. He talked with Dara last. What she said, in every interview that followed, was only this: "He reminded me why I started." Sandra from Crossfire handed her card to Dara and said 3 words: "Call me Monday." Michael Jackson left the same way he arrived. Front door, cap back on. Moving through the November night without urgency. He gave no interviews. The story spread person to person, accumulating texture with each retelling, growing not because anyone exaggerated, but because the truth of it was large enough to keep expanding. What he had done was this. He had been in a room where someone needed help, and he had helped. No announcement, no cameras. He sat behind a kit in a small Chicago club and played music with strangers because the music needed to be played, and he was capable of playing it. Curtis Webb kept, framed on the wall of every rehearsal space he occupied, a single photograph from that night. Slightly blurry, slightly underexposed. A man behind a drum kit with a cap pulled low, mid-stroke, the left stick beginning to fall. You cannot confirm who it is. You can only see the posture, the grip, the quality of stillness that precedes motion. He kept it as a reminder of what it means to walk into a room and offer what you have, without needing the room to know where it came from. If you want to know what Michael said to Dara in those last quiet moments, the thing she never shared publicly, tell me in the comments, because that part of the story deserves its own time. If you enjoyed spending this time here, I'd be grateful if you'd consider subscribing. A simple like also helps more than you'd think.